Hi, I'm Brian Lambert, and welcome to the April 6, 1984 edition of The Facts as We Know Them. Ours is a bi-weekly, sometimes irreverent, but always fair review of the news vital to these parts. Our regular correspondents are Eric Eskela from WCCO Radio, David Carr from the Twin Cities Reader, and we're pleased to have Deborah Fisher, Legal Affairs correspondent for Minnesota Public Radio, joining us. Deborah and gentlemen, I think I smell a conspiracy here. There's something going on when it's nearing April 15th and suddenly the government bursts out with big happy news about all the money it's saved from the last few years of tax collection. We're, of course, talking about the $900 million budget surplus.
It could go up.
Yeah, it's going up all the time.
It could go up
Who knows
again,
what it'll be
sure.
next month?
Give or take $1 billion, you know.
David, perhaps you can explain a bit of the political ramifications of this. Who really comes out of this smelling like a rose? You were saying before that Rudy Perpich got out in front just in time to get run over by it.
But now I'm going to have to back up and say that 3 people really benefit. Rudy Perpich, and Rudy Perpich. Rudy spent
Gus Dunhow, he doesn't get anything out of this equation.
Well, Gus isn't running for anything. He gets to smile out from the front page of the paper, but that's about the extent of it. Rudy Perpich spent Tuesday flying around the state with DFL leaders at state expense, I might remind you, bringing the good news to people. Giving away money is something politicians are pretty good at, generally, and I don't think Rudy Perpich is much of an exception. He's happier than heck. Has every right to be. He loves
Was
to
he
win.
making a lot of promises on this tour? Is the
No. All he's
patch up Main Street here,
all he's got to
that's
do
the
is
new
walk around and say, "We got money in the bank. We got money coming back to you."
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty much apple pie. The reason that he's getting so much benefit out of it is because when he heard the number, rather than dilly-dallying around, he was going to hold out for the July 1 repeal, which was a more conservative, would have brought more money into the state. As soon as he saw that the surplus was going to be big, he moved to orchestrate the announcement. Even as the ink was drying on the new forecast, he was giving it away, you know, and all set to get the higher ground on the issue, and I think he effectively did so.
Are the Republicans frozen out of this in terms of...
Pretty much, surprisingly enough. We were just, a couple weeks ago, I know Eric and I were giving them credit for framing this issue, taking leadership and pushing the heck out of it, but the gravy train left, the political gravy train left the other day, and there were no IRs on it.
Well, I think they can still claim in an election year term, I think they can still claim that we prodded the DFL in this direction and that we were...
That's weak, though, isn't
well,
it?
it's
They'll
weak.
claim it, though.
Yeah, but that's the best they can do out of a situation when you're in the minority. I mean, just by the nature of the way the game works, you have to maximize your opportunities, and I think they did that, and they still deserve good credit. I think good credit for doing that. But Perpich just has all of the perks that come with being a majority party governor. And
In economic good times.
Right.
I mean, it's a great time to be a politician.
can the
overall.
Republicans say, and I don't know if they can, but can the Republicans say, hey, if you hadn't have taxed us so heavy in the first place, we wouldn't have had to mess with all this? Is that going to help?
Well, do you think it'll play?
I don't know.
in the
I'm
fall?
asking. I'm not sure.
I don't.
Well, you know, as for the fall,
People
I mean, I would...
remember.
They taxed us too heavy to begin with, and they shouldn't have been collecting interest on our money for the time that they were.
I don't know, it seems like the bad times, I mean, I remember the bad economic times when, you know, all these measures were put into place, and I don't think people will forget that soon. I'm wondering, are we going to get a sob story again next year? I mean, this seems to go sort of up and down. One year it's fat, the next year it's lean. It's like, you know, they can never sort of straighten
which
it
brings
out.
up an important point.
Well, the chaotic bookkeeping, I think.
Well,
is what
the chaotic bookkeeping is not over, though, because all these wonderful surpluses are the result of some pretty shoddy estimates that weren't even in the ballpark.
And they are projections now. We always think,
Just like the shortfalls were last
right,
year.
everything seems to be set in stone, but of course this is a very dynamic projection only, and Gus Dunhow said at his news conference the other day again, and it's been his big term of the political season has been, we're in an economic fool's paradise. And then at 85, the federal budget deficit...
Gloomy Gus.
Yeah,
Gloomy
I didn't
Gus
think
down.
Gus was capable of that.
They're going to jack the interest rates again nationally, and then we're going to be back down in a time of less revenue collected and unemployment going back up. And so the cyclical nature of it remains looming. And that's why the key part of this, I think, for the Democrats is that $375 million budget surplus. That there was
They're
so
gonna
much
retain,
there was so much money available that they could kick back the money earlier and have a surplus.
You know, on that note, a little bit, maybe you can clarify this. They're talking the retroactive,
Repeal.
the repeal. That's right, of the January as of January 1.
Spit that gum
It's
out.
supposed to net $357 million. Am I right about that?
Well, back to taxpayers.
Back to taxpayers. Okay, out of 900 million. Well, there's still a chunk in there somewhere else. They're going to rebate 357 million and keep 375 million. And there's something in there.
Well, they could do some corporate
there's-
tax stuff. They're working on a corporate tax and some property tax relief to farmers.
And jobs too.
And the emergency jobs program will get the money that Mo and other leaders had
I
hoped to
think
give it.
the farm thing looks real good right now. That seems to
Well,
be
that's
sort
how
of
you get
floating
the
to the
votes, huh?
surface. Yeah.
Again,
I
the
have a-
House is up for election, the Senate isn't, and
They're
that,
good.
as I said 2 weeks ago, that's why all the impetus for this came from the House.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were out there like this, because they're up in November, and Roger Moe and the senators have 2 years to wait. And the House was, this is a case where the
Mm. But the
House saw
Republicans
what
have
the
got to be very worried about that.
Well,
I mean,
but the
this
fact is,
a-
this is where representative democracy works so well.
Yeah.
Because this is really the legislature going to what the people wanted big. And so this is the political wind blowing, and the people should be very happy that they got the message across.
I have a question. If, in fact, we have enough money to pay our bills as a state, why must we continue to wait till October to get our property tax and rent refunds back? Now, I don't know about
Is
you
there
guys.
a personal agenda in this, Mr. Carr?
I'd like to.
Well, well, as a matter of fact, I'm paying out for state taxes this year, and I'm going to get a break on property, but I have
Gotta
to
get a
wait.
new accountant.
But this accounting practice, which is all it is, came from a one-time shortfall in the budget. So that the state didn't have the money to pay those bills, so they just pushed them back to October in just sort of an arbitrary manner. Now that they got some dough, can't they?
Is anybody in the Hill talking about reforming this?
No, but once, of course,
think
we
they've
mentioned
gotten
on
down
this
that
show.
low yet.
This will
Once
start
it-
a gigantic ball rolling.
I would say the momentum.
I heard on the facts.
The momentum starts from this moment forward.
You can claim pride of authorship on that,
I've
Mr.
never
Carr.
been part of momentum before. I'll
Me either. It's
hear
kind
it.
of fun.
Turning to other matters, the
Nice transition.
speaking of things are snowballing rather badly, or have been for some time now, over at William Mitchell School of Law. And Deborah, you've been following this case for a while. What are the new developments at this point? To ask a very general question.
The most recent development is that the women who originally charged several people at William Mitchell with sexual harassment have finally gotten tired of waiting for the State Human Rights Department to do anything, not just something, but anything that's been stalled for months. And they finally filed a civil suit for $3 million against the school, a law firm that represents the school, and several individuals.
Now, the inclusion of the law firm is unique in some ways.
It is. What originally happened, to backtrack a little and sort of update, when the complaints first emerged, the Board of Trustees at the law school asked some quote-unquote independent investigators to come in and look things over. And the independent investigators found that there was no grounds for the charges. Well, the investigators turned out to be two lawyers from the law firm that represents the law school. And the head of the law firm, Mr. Oppenheimer, sits on the Board of Trustees at Mitchell. And that really left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. And one of the side things that happened when all that was going on is that these two investigators were sworn to confidentiality. They were not supposed to release the names of the women. And in some of the documents that I've seen, what happened was a series of memos were sent trying to confirm some information. And the women received copies of the memos, as did the people who were charged, and those copies were sent to everyone, and the names were, I think you could say, inadvertently released, but they were released.
On a blind carbon copy at the bottom. The secretary.
So in other words, when Jeffrey Peters received copies of correspondence from the law firm telling him how things were going, there were the names of the women who filed the complaint. And
From
they
day
shouldn't-
one, bad
Yeah,
faith.
yeah. So the law firm has been included in the lawsuit under a little-known statute. I think it's called a deceit statute. It's not often used, but the attorneys representing the women are asking for treble damages against the law firm. So that's sort of a side issue that I think could really get...
Yeah, that
I mean, the
is
legal
curious, yeah.
community's upset enough about it as it is, about the charge against the law school, but here's another
It's so
whole...
embarrassing, isn't it?
Well, it's embarrassing.
It's
I think.
lawlessness.
It's the way the school has handled it, I think, that's really poor.
Well, and the big picture question is this process, again, and the remedies that offended parties have through the State Department, obviously the mechanism is not working very well.
No, the Human Rights Department, I think, is a joke. I mean, you can put things into the system
Have
all
they
you
offered
want,
any
nothing ever
excuses
comes
for the
out.
foot dragging that's been going on?
Oh, it's
The law school
systemic.
or
No,
the-
the Human Rights Commission.
It's systemic problems.
There-
there. I mean, we've all read about them.
Yeah.
You know, it would seem that something like this would be terribly difficult to investigate. I mean, as much as anything else, it's one person's word against another.
Well, the
I mean,
biggest
they're
problem
not-
is that the law school, for some time, has just shut up. For a while, they were talking to the press and making some attempt. You know, they couldn't answer the allegations, and, you know, you understand that people are under investigation in their legal processes, but they would at least respond, and then they decided at some point to not respond at all, not respond at all. And so it's very difficult to do stories when you basically have a lot of people talking and it sounds very one-sided.
What's the potential impact on the school as far as
Oh,
fundraising or
devastating.
morale? What can happen to William Mitchell because
Such
of
a
this?
fine school, too.
Yes, it is, and
It's-
that's,
they teach lawyers how to think, and I
they
think...
teach lawyers how to represent people in sexual harassment suits. That's the irony of it.
Well, to me, it's, yeah, the irony, of course, is horrible, but it seems like they haven't really changed their behavior one bit. Jeff Peters is working for a board member as of this show. I think the only way the plaintiffs are going to make headway, and you could probably tell me whether this is right or not, is just by the preponderance of circumstantial evidence. In other words, we have 15 women, or how many women, who've all said, look, the guy's been doing things to me, I felt threatened. Not only that, but he has a history of it in the past. Will that stuff cut it in court?
I think so. I've seen the complaint. The complaint is about 30 pages long. There are 8 women in the lawsuit, and I'd say with each woman there are at least 10 to 15 separate incidences of sexual harassment. That's a pretty
What defines that?
well, you know,
What
if that were,
defines sexual
if that were a
harassment?
constructive
That's-
lie,
that's
I
an
mean, how could you
interesting
make
question.
up that much
Is there a
stuff?
fine line between what is sexual harassment and what is good-natured kidding between people of the opposite sex? I mean, under law, what constitutes harassment? Or what are they alleging that is harassment?
I don't know if I could speak to the specific wording of the law. I could discuss some of the incidences that have
Can
been
you?
raised.
I think
Unwelcome touching, even after people have repeatedly said, no, don't do that. Playboy magazines on display in the dean's office. A lot of stroking of hair, putting hands on body, off-color jokes, and no response to those complaints.
I read the complaint too, and it was, I mean, it was titillating reading, of course, you know. But the another one of their this harassments was the famous sort of collegiate handshake that one of the.
And that's such sick stuff. For
It's,
people-
well, it's small stuff. I mean,
so juvenile.
I
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
It sounds like they got. I think the way, to me at least, the way sexual harassment is defined is that Ellen Goodman, in her beautiful column she did about the New Bedford rapes, I forget the exact wording, but it's when a woman says no,
Yeah,
it means
yeah.
rape. And sexual harassment is the same thing. Working peers know how to act around one another, and if one should indicate to another that a behavior makes them uncomfortable, that I would think would constitute sexual harassment.
How many
Does it
women,
constitute
how
that
many
in
women
courts
are
now,
in
though?
administrative positions at William Mitchell?
Yeah, that was my question.
You mean currently?
Yeah.
Very few, and almost all of the women who have formally come forward and complained no longer work at the college, or had received negative performance reports, have had their salaries dropped. I mean, that's the real strong connection here. Aside from the specific incidences of harassment, the women have also had their careers essentially affected.
Have you detected anything among the student body, any kind of prevailing
I've spoken to
sentiment?
students, I've also spoken to professors, and getting back to the morale and the effect on the school and the legal community, I think. The morale is very bad.
Yeah.
Well, the morale in the overall legal community seems to be at a low. I mean, the judges have been getting beat up.
It's not been a good year for the legal community.
Now, Crane Mitten's back
Good for them.
at the state Supreme Court, and how's he going to do?
I don't know. I think the issues have really changed since the 3-judge panel.
Have the politics changed, or have the issues
I think the
changed?
politics have always been there, but I think that that famous momentum we were discussing is sort of picked up in this case, and that the
Which way is it?
I think the popular issue that has emerged is we're persecuting this man for his homosexuality, and he is a fine jurist, and what the Supreme Court essentially is being asked to decide is if it's okay to let a homosexual sit on the bench, and that was not the issue they started with.
The
Well, that's not a
original
question
issue was,
of
did he
law
break the
anyway.
law?
Right, he broke the law, he admittedly broke the law, he said he would continue to break the law, and that is not a good standard for a judge to maintain. And now it's gotten down to, will we allow a homosexual to sit on the bench? And I think that's a different question.
So it's a human rights issue, civil rights issue now.
I don't think that the Supreme Court will be that receptive to that kind of approach, because the broader issue is an important one, and certainly one that should be discussed. But I don't think after someone has already broken a law, which we could all maybe agree is a silly one, judges as a whole are, if anybody in our society...
Well, he was talking, I mean, this is in essence prostitution.
Well,
yeah,
if-
those were the more serious charges,
Yeah.
I think, to begin with.
If anybody in our society is going to live to the letter of the law, it's going to have to be the judges.
I hope
isn't
so.
it?
You'd hope.
I think
I mean, that's why we hire them, right?
Right.
one of the interesting things that's happened, though, as this case has made its way over months and months from the three-judge panel to the full Supreme Court, is I think the public perception of the internal workings of the legal community has changed. I think that you've heard a lot of criticism of well, these judges are all going to protect each other. There's been a lot of complaining, and I think when you talk about politics, I think the Supreme Court is very aware of that. And I think part of that is coming out in the real big discipline that's been laid on Judge Kirby. You know, for a relatively minor infraction compared to some of the other things we're seeing, but boy, they're saying kick him off the bench.
For errors of degree, really.
And then-
I mean, there are a lot of judges that have a martini at lunch. Is the second one actionable? Should you get in trouble? Or is it that third one? Or
And I wonder if it's coincidence that the legislature now is taking a strong look at an institutionalized merit selection process
Well,
for
that's been
judges,
going on for some time, though, that ever since Perpich took office and changed the way they pick judges.
where he's had 50-some appointments
Well,
with
he-
no
he
real
came-
firm process.
well, Deborah, maybe you know, but when he came in, he had a good appointments process on his hands.
It was,
Good.
yes,
It was
yeah.
wonderful.
Everybody's praised
So why
it.
are we reinventing the wheel?
Democrats appoint Democrats,
Well-
capital agog.
Perpich wanted less input from attorneys, and under Quee's system, there was an appointment panel in each of the 10 judicial districts. And Perpich said right up front, right at the very beginning, his philosophy was to get some of those attorneys out of there.
Yeah.
He wanted more control, and so he took one member from each judicial district and got it down to a 10-member panel.
And we should say that I don't think anyone is really saying that Perpich has made bad appointments. The problem is
As
there's
far
no...
as the judges go,
There's no
we could talk.
Yeah, judicial appointments. There's no firm process in stone, in statute.
Well,
And that's what concerns me.
keep in mind, of course, that the attorneys are mad because they have less input, and I think you always have to keep that in mind.
All right. Well, if there's an evolution going on with regards to the judicial system here, there's also an evolution going on in the Minneapolis City Council. Barbara Carlson has taken a turn of her own.
Yeah, this is really
She's
something.
never done that before.
Well,
This is really
Barbara, one
something.
of the steadier members of the
We
council.
thought it was going to be a very quiet Republican year, didn't we, Mr. Carr?
Right?
And all of a sudden now we have this battle for the mountain, seems to me, between the old classic Rockefeller-type Republicans, moderate Republicans. I think you could say Durenberger-type Republicans. I think I can say that without being contradicted.
Without slamming Durenberger.
No, I'm progressive, moderate.
Electable.
Okay. And I'm going to say the new Glenn Sherwood-style fundamentalist religion type of Republican. Here's what...
In from the heavens.
Briefly, 7th Ward Council member Barbara Carlson, been 2 terms, 3rd term now in the council, Republican minority leader on the council.
Well, it's kind of a nominal title, isn't
Said
it?
they only have 3.
Well, he had to say
Two.
something.
2 with an independent. But anyway, at 3:30 Wednesday morning, after her Senate district convention, in which she was pounded and battered by what she called a fanatical group of people who want to take choices away from individuals, anti-Jew, anti-gay, fundamentalist, born again, more than simply pro-life advocates.
Sound like Republicans to me.
They battered her.
But that doesn't sound like Glenn Sherwood. I mean, please, go ahead.
This is her words now, not
Yes,
mine.
all right.
They really kicked her around at her convention, and she was elected only as a token delegate, she says. And she, at 3:30 in the morning, she kind of woke up in a cold sweat, apparently, and said, "I'm leaving the party." Didn't tell anybody. Charlie Hoyt found out about it, the same as everybody else did, around noon. She held a news conference at 3 o'clock Wednesday afternoon. And she's leaving the party, said moderates have been disenfranchised, that it's gender gap, it's it's born-again fundamentalism, that Reagan, with his support of social program cuts, prayer school, pro-life support, has really made it legitimate to narrow the scope of the Republican Party to a point where Barbara Carlson doesn't think there are enough people in the tent to make it a viable party.
Which,
Curious,
of course,
curious.
begs the question, what does it mean? One thing seems clear, Eric. What is it?
Well, moderates, I think Dernberger said, I don't know whether to say that you're courageous or stupid.
Yeah.
And Charlie Hoyt says, well, the way you fight, if you think an element is bad in your political party, the way you fight it is not to cut and run. And
What if it's not a winnable
She
battle?
seems to
She's
have
evident-
another agenda here, doesn't she?
Well, I don't know.
Well, yeah. Barbara
the nose twitches.
always begins with item 1 on her agenda, which is Barbara Carlson and her political future. This has been a rather cathartic year for Barbara Carlson.
it has.
She's publicly admitted that she was raped. She's talked about her alcoholism, and now she's done this, and she is also willing to address the issue of, yes, she would like to be mayor, even though it isn't possible at this time. I mean, she is relentless. All reporters know that if you're short for time and you need a quick quote, don't stop at Barbara's place because you're going to be there for a while.
Well, let's go beyond the little Barbara Carlson neighborhood agenda, because I do think this does have a broader impact. And I think the impact...
Eric, are you saying you smell a progressive move afoot? not
No,
only in
I
Minneapolis
don't.
and-
I have been to Republican conventions in the state since 1970, and I sense a real, incredible conservative bent in the Republican Party in Minnesota, to the point where in 1982, when Wongberg and Overgaard and all these guys were trying to get the Republican gubernatorial endorsement, it was really, how conservative can we get? It wasn't, are you pro-life? Is it how pure you are on pro-life?
By the
We have a
time-
don't we have a
Well,
situation
David was
here
there.
now where
Yeah,
you
well,
were there.
by the time, Brian was too,
Yeah.
and by the time they get out of the convention, they're looking like Lyndon LaRouche,
Yeah.
and how are they going to be electable?
Well, I
after
mean,
this?
isn't this interesting? Where there's a lot of discussion now about how the Democratic Party is fragmenting into
Right.
two unique camps, distinct camps, I should say. And now you detect something the same in
She
Minnesota's
thinks, and
party.
Carlson said today at her news conference, she believes that it's a lot of pro-life Democrats coming to the Republican Party,
Right, I agree.
saying
and I don't
saying
agree
that
with
we feel more at home here.
Right.
And she finds that bad. Now, what does this mean for the two? I think I can say this: 2 of the 3 top potential opponents of
Pretenders.
Perpich for governor in 2 years. Jim Euland of Duluth and Arnie Carlson, the state auditor, they are too liberal for this crowd.
Right.
Dave Jennings, their darling of 2 years ago, one of their darlings, certainly would be able to get an endorsement, I think. Maybe Mr. Sherwood could get another an endorsement. But Carlson's point is, can they win, statewide? Can you...
The-
And what does this mean for Euland and Carlson, who are just salivating to be governor?
The problem, of course, is that moderate support.
Their problem is that Rudy's on a roll.
Right.
Well, let's just talk about getting out of the party.
cliff before they-
Let's just
within
talk about getting out of the party.
Within
Yeah,
the party,
sorry.
moderate support is, by definition, just your average political support. Whereas this bedrock conservative is, in fact, chiseled into stone. And you can't outwork these people. They've got religion. They've got God on their side. And they've got a mission. And if you're going to try and just talk mere politics with them, you're not going to get very far.
Yeah.
This will be something to follow.
This is
Thank
good.
you.
From a reporter's standpoint, from a political reporter's standpoint, this is going to make the Republican year interesting in a year when we thought it was going to be dry as a prairie wind. So I think it's going to be something, you're right,
Yeah.
well worth watching.
One of the events that I found less than well worth watching was WCCO Television's self-examination last Sunday
Probably
night.
because I was on it, right?
But no, I thought I was craning my neck and
I
straining
was at
my
the
eyes and
David
everything.
Crosby concert, formerly of Crosby, Stills, Nash
A
and
much
Young.
hotter,
That was his
a
get out
much
of jail,
hotter ticket.
Yeah,
tour?
on his Get Out of Jail tour, and I didn't see it, so feel free to carry on
But
without
David,
me.
you were there, and I think the reviews, it's fair to say, the reviews have not been all good on the conduct, or rather, I should say, the results of the show,
Well,
and it was titled "In the Public Interest" and was meant to be an examination of CCOs and journalism in general's techniques and practices.
People sounded hopeful going in, like they thought it was, geez, isn't this wonderful? They're going to let all the critics into the studio and let them have at it, and that's not
Personally,
what
I
happened.
found it
It sounds like-
excruciatingly dull.
it was,
I stayed through for 2 hours, but there was nothing there that made. I had no galvanic skin reaction to anything that happened.
I think well, to traffic in some cliches that have served me very
Why
well
not?
already, that is this business. Sometimes sacred cows don't burn very well.
That was a good line.
That, and I'll
But what does
use
it mean?
What it means is you got the most responsible television station in the market opening themselves up to scrutiny. The way it was set up, the atmosphere was, it was a very tranquilizing room. It was very calming. Bill Curtis kind of soothing and smiling and looking at you, and it all seemed so, gosh, I'm really not that mad after all. And these people who started out spitting fire after a while would get their answer or their non-answer and lean back and kind of, well, okay. I think the main thing I learned from the show is that people don't know that much about television, not enough. And Dave Morris said afterwards, he said it proves that the masses don't know a thing about this business and that they don't know a thing about what we're doing. And I think to some degree it was correct because I found their criticism to be weak, to be uninformed, and not useful as far as teaching WCCO anything.
But whose fault is that people don't know? I mean, this is such a rare opportunity that people have to come in and see how it all works. I can imagine a lot of viewers may have been just simply intimidated and overwhelmed. This is a huge machine, CCO.
Yeah, it seems to me that there's anytime you're examining or scrutinizing or trying to cross-examine someone from the television media,
On
you're
their
at,
turf.
you're at an
Yeah.
enormous disadvantage
Yeah.
because they are by nature ameliorative personalities, I think.
Well, what about
And,
the-
Well, they
the
know how-
forum hasn't been invented yet to properly examine.
What about the
people.
exercise? Does it matter that the public doesn't know about TV? Does it matter that the criticism wasn't good? Was it important at all for CCO to give this forum? Was it, and maybe it was the greatest thing in the world, I don't know. A cynic might say it was 2 hours of promoting the news.
As,
What purpose did it serve?
well, I think that their intentions were good. I think the execution was mediocre. And I think the result was stupefyingly boring. At least to sit there, it was horrible. I myself, if I was going to set up a show like that, the format would be one bar, island bar right up the middle, pitcher of beer, four folks from the business on one side, 4 folks on another, get about halfway into the pitcher, and then you're going to find out what people
Would you
are
have a
really
television
thinking
camera
about.
there to begin with, though? Would you have a television camera there to begin with?
You mean...
It seems to me that the presence of the TV camera is really what throws the balance off. And yet at the same time, you're never going to get a television audience to have any appreciation for this unless it is on TV.
Well, I think what has to happen is people have to bounce off each other and go back and forth. Instead, what you get is people climbing up on little soapboxes.
Yeah.
Would phone calls from the audience would have been better, where a person in his home with a telephone might not be as intimidated?
Nah.
Something.
They can't follow up.
Something
They
better.
followed
For
up.
TV.
They said
Somebody, if someone were angry, were truly angry with there, it would have been more interesting.
Well, I'm glad I went to David Crosby.
Well, you can stay tuned. The band will be back in 2 weeks. They canceled, folks. Don't miss it next time. We usually close the program with a quote of the week, but I think better than that is Eric has come across an event of the week.
Well, in this year of political campaigning, you got to find money where you can find it, and Jim Oberstar, the DFL candidate for the Senate, is going to Boston, was in Boston last night as the program is being taped, Thursday night, for a fundraising dinner with Tip O'Neill and Kevin McHale of the Boston Celtics, a Hibbing native. Oberstar's from Chisholm, and so Kevin McHale was there last night in a tuxedo trying to raise money for Congressman Oberstar's Senate campaign. How about that? Politics,
Who's the PR
indeed.
person
I
to
like
put that
it.
together, I wonder.
Indeed, politics make strange bedfellows, and the event was held in the Kennedy Room at the Parker House Hotel in Boston. So,
Well,
For what it's worth.
When Bill Frenzel has his next fundraiser in Hawaii, we'll all have to go, right? That's our show for this week. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, David. Thank you, Eric. We will be back in 2 weeks with another edition of The Facts as we know them.
And
Good
we
night.
mean it.